Welcome to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast where seeing things differently inspires limitless possibilities. This podcast is being brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Limitless was created in order to inform, educate, entertain, and share stories from within the blind and partially sighted community in order to show the world that the opportunities for those who are blind or partially sighted are truly limitless. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to your host, the Executive Director and Founder of Blind Beginnings, Shawn Marcellet.
Welcome back to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. It is Blindness Awareness Month, and so we are hitting you with some pretty fascinating topics. And today is no exception. We're talking about the fact that most people who have never met somebody with a disability tend to feel a little uncomfortable when they meet somebody who is blind. And we're going to talk about that. Why is that? Why do we think that is? What is the process that people go through? And how do we get to the point where we do feel comfortable? And I have a few people joining me today. So I have Rob and Emily from Blind Beginnings. So they are both sighted and have been working with Blind Beginnings for over a year now, both of you. That's awesome. So welcome, Rob and Emily.
Thank you very much.
And I also have Ryan and Linda, who are married. Spoiler alert. Ryan is blind, Linda is sighted, and Ryan is also friends with Rob and a former coworker of his. So we're sort of a happy little family here. So welcome, Ryan and Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Okay, Ryan, can you start off by telling us a little bit about your vision, when you lost your vision mostly, and what your level of vision is?
Sure. So I lost my sight when I was 23 due to a car accident. So I have no vision at all. My eyes were ruptured, my optic nerve was severed, and my face was mushed. So there's no sight, no light perception, nothing.
Did you have any experience with people who are blind or people with disabilities before you lost your vision?
Nobody that was blind, but I do remember in high school or junior high, we had some students with disabilities in there, such as, I think, cerebral palsy, MS, but nobody that was blind. And so that was really my only exposure to persons with disabilities.
So how many years from losing your vision before you met Rob and Linda? I don't know who you met first.
Yeah, so I met Linda first. I was taking a course at BCIT, and they had me come in and do a job shadow. And it just so happened that Linda was the manager, I guess, at the time, who was showing me around the call center and kind of walking me through kind of the day-to-day operations. And then I think probably about a year after that is when I had met Rob.
Okay. And so how long had you been blind when you met Linda?
We met in 99. And you lost your vision in
95.
Okay.
So
so like
4 years. Yeah.
Okay. Just trying to kind of grasp how comfortable you were with your own situation, because it is an adjustment for sure, right?
It is. And I wasn't living in the Lower Mainland at the time. I lost my sight. I was living in Kamloops. And so, I had my orientation and mobility training. So my white cane training there. I eventually had a guide dog there and, got hooked up with a mentor there who just really helped me, encouraged me, supported me going through the process, because there wasn't a lot of services in Kamloops at the time. Mm-hmm. And my family's all in Alberta. So I was kind of on my own other than my friends.
Wow. Okay. So Linda, had you met somebody who was blind before you met Ryan?
Yeah. So in my workplace, we had a person who was blind, and we needed to get some training for him. So we brought in a trainer, and it was that person that Ryan just mentioned who asked me if Ryan could come in and do a job shadow. So that employee that I had, he was probably the first person who was blind that I knew. And I just kind of remember, I guess at the beginning, I can't really say I ever felt uncomfortable with him. From the beginning, it was more of a learning experience, like, just trying to figure out, how do you relate to somebody who's blind? How do you have a conversation to somebody who's blind? Are there taboo words? Do you have to worry about the words that you say? And I think when I think back to that time, I think there was I just remember there being a lot of people in our workplace too who reacted so differently to this employee. Some people were so afraid to say things like, did you watch the news last night? And then they would almost crumple, to the ground when they realized they said that word, did you see?
Yeah.
And I would, and I just would open up and ask, does it bother you when somebody says that? Well, no, I watch the news every night like everybody else does. Those words don't bother me, but I think what I've learned is it's everybody's different. It's just you have to have that conversation with the person, get to know them, what's okay, what's not okay. Because, what might be okay for Ryan might not be for the next person. So you can't paint everybody with the same picture, just like anybody else. So to answer your question, was I uncomfortable? Not really, just because of the employee that we had already, but still, Ryan's a different person. Different personality. And it's just to get to know that person and know what's comfortable and what may not be.
What about you, Rob? Had you met anybody who was blind before you met Ryan?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I'll be the odd duck out, and I will fully admit, yeah, I was totally uncomfortable. I was freaked out. I had come into I'd been hired on by an assistive technology company, so I went from never really interacting with anybody with a disability right into just being completely immersed in that community and like learning about all the different technology. And so it was a little bit of trial by fire, but I do remember, sitting in the interview with Steve, him saying, we've got Ryan here. Ryan's blind. He's an employee. And I do remember it going through my head. It's like, I have no idea what to do. Like, what does that mean? Like, what is, like, if I'm working side by side with this person, I just didn't have any conception of somebody who's blind, what they can do, what they can't do. Like, I remember my first day sitting across from Ryan and listening to Jaws for the first time and watching him like use his computer. And I'm like, oh my God, like what is going on? What sorcery is this? Like, this is like, I had no idea this thing existed. And so I think that for me, like, that was the main source of that sense of being uncomfortable with just the unknown.
What about you, Emily? Had you met somebody who was blind before you came to Blind Beginnings?
I had actually very briefly, about 6 months before starting at Blind Beginnings, but it was also in a professional setting. And I do remember being a bit awkward at certain times. And I just kind of remained quiet and just carried on. And there definitely was like a awkward or uncomfortableness, but just like Linda was saying, I think like you can ask certain questions in certain settings. And I think in a professional setting, of course, like there were certain things I just didn't ask and I just carried on and was awkward and uncomfortable. And then I came to Blind Beginnings and shattered it all.
Okay, so what are the sorts of things that I'm going off script here, you guys, but what are the sorts of things that you wanted to ask that you felt like you couldn't? Like, I get the language one. I know people struggle with that. Is it okay for me to use visual language around you, or even say nice to see you? Is that offensive? Like, I know people have that, but what other things were you wondering about?
Wow, that's really...
I think for me, a lot of when I first met Ryan, and that was more of a personal relationship rather than a professional one, it was like, how does he do the day-to-day things? We get up, we get dressed, we, brush our teeth, we have some breakfast, we go to work. How does he manage that? How does he know that his clothes match? How does he know, that the socks match? Or that he doesn't have pink socks on or
Oh, there's
something
the
like
pink
that.
sock story. Had to come up
I
again.
did, of course.
You actually own pink socks, right?
No,
That's
I
very
don't.
No, you can tell the story.
No, you tell it better than I do.
So years ago, when Ryan was working at his previous employer, probably no, I don't know if Rob was there yet at that point. But anyways,
I
Ryan
think I was
phones me
there.
at work. He says, "Can you keep your pink socks out of my drawer?" I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, I'm wearing your pink socks to work today." I said, "No, you're not." He said, "Yeah, I am. Everybody here is telling me I've got pink socks on." I said, "No, you don't. They're lying to you." He says, "No, I'm wearing pink socks." I said, "Okay, we're going to put it this way. If you're wearing pink socks, those aren't mine because I don't own pink socks. So whose pink socks are you wearing?"
You're in big trouble, Ryan.
You know, buddy, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Those jerks." And all of a sudden you could hear all these guys laughing in the background in his workplace.
Yes.
That's so good. Oh man. I am so thankful my staff does not do that to me.
Yeah.
Yet, now we
Yes.
have
Yeah.
ideas.
Exactly.
They know it's okay now.
Right. Any other, like, what other questions, Emily? Was there something, can you remember something that you wanted to ask that you couldn't?
I think like you're curious about different things. Like Linda would be curious about the day-to-day stuff, where I was curious, like, I don't know, how did they, do I help them do something? Should I help them? You know, we're walking over to this table, like, to sit down. Should I say, like, oh, the chair's on your left? I know, like, but at the time I was like, I just didn't know. I didn't know what to do. And I was just kind of a little awkward and a little like, I don't know how to act in this situation when everyone's uncomfortable or everyone's comfortable and laughing at whatever. I didn't know how to feel.
So all of you had a previous experience. And then, so when you met the second person, the Ryan or the Shawn, was it more comfortable? Was it less comfortable? Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah, I think for me, it was 100% more comfortable. I think that a lot of that discomfort just comes from seeing the disability first. When you aren't used to, say, being around someone who is blind, and you're put into that situation for the first time, that's all that you're thinking about. And in that sense, before you know the person as well. Like, you see the blindness first and the person second. As unfortunate as that is, that's just kind of human nature. And I think that when you do that, that's where you get tripped up, and that's where you get like a lot of that discomfort, because you're trying to deal with this disability that you don't know how to. And so what has to happen is that you have to realize, you know what, this is just a person. Like, they're just a person. The blindness is, that's secondary. That doesn't matter. And when you start interacting with that person as a person, everything is all that discomfort and all that other stuff just kind of falls away. And for me, like, that's what it took. It took, for me to meet Ryan, and for us to work together for years in order to really, for that to really sink in. And and certainly meeting other people who are blind, you quickly realize that it's just about the person and not the disability.
Did it actually take years before you feel comfortable with Ryan?
You can be honest.
No, it didn't.
It did for me.
She's still getting used to it.
So yeah, what was it like for you, Linda? This is more of a dating situation. Like,
It's very different. I mean, when you have an employee, it's professional, and this is how to do the job, and it's training and it's coaching and leading in that way. But with Ryan, it was different, and I think Emily kind of touched on it as well. Like, what do I say? What's too much explanation? What's not enough? What does he need to know? And and it would be frustrating because I would, try to describe something to Ryan. He's like, it doesn't matter. I don't care. And then in another breath, he wants something described and explained to him. And it's like, well, where's that line? I don't know where that line is of what he's important to him and what isn't important to him. And, I just, it was challenging for a long time. It still is, I mean, I would leave the dishwasher down because I knew in 10 minutes I was coming back into the kitchen to fill it, not knowing Ryan was going to walk past the door and, go sailing over it. And those kinds of things happen. I'm not a very good guide. I have walked him into things he shouldn't have been walked into. And it's taken a long time.
It's a learning process. Like for you, Linda, you have learned now that if we're going somewhere, you are shorter than me, you need to look up. Right. So,
as I haven't in the past.
Right. But there's all these little things that you learn. And it's a continual learning process. Some people want to be guided on the right, others on the left, some on the shoulder, some by the elbow. Everybody has their own way of doing things, and you don't know unless you have that conversation, but you have to be open to that conversation.
And I'm going to say one thing, Ryan is extremely open to talk about the situation as well with himself, always has been. There's been times where we're out and young children will be staring at him and the parents will be like, stop staring, look away, blah, blah, blah. And, I'll say to Ryan, there's some kids that are looking at you. And he's like, whereabouts are they? And I'll explain, and he'll look over to them and say, do you have any questions? Like, it's okay to ask. It's okay to be curious. And the parents were, wanting to crawl under their chairs and that, and they're like, really? So, I think those are very special times where you can have a child that feels comfortable to ask questions and knows it's okay. And, I hope that helps them in the future as well, too, to be comfortable around people with a disability.
Mm-hmm. I think that leads to the comfort. I think, like Shawn, is very much the same way. I always feel comfortable to say, oh, I kind of have a blind question. Like, can I ask you? And I think that leads to my comfort to be able to say at any point, I have a question. And it might be a stupid question, but here it is. And there's always that open-endedness.
Yeah. It's interesting because in a professional setting, especially at Blind Beginnings, like, hello, you get a Blindness 101 workshop when you start to work for us. You're going to be working with children and youth who are blind. So you have to have this crash course and understand, and it's always okay to ask questions. But in a social situation, I think it's a lot trickier, right? You don't really know what you're allowed to ask. Interesting, the description, like how much description or do you want or not want? For me, the issue is help. Like my husband has to walk this very skinny line of help me the right amount, not too much and not too little. Don't forget I'm blind, because then you're a jerk. But if you overhelp, you're being patronizing. And I feel bad for him for that.
The spouses have it rough. Absolutely.
They do. I think it would be really tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not in the ways people would think. Not necessarily because they always have to drive or they have to guide, but for that other really tricky stuff, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the uncomfortable, because I feel like there's sort of this, there's some qualities that I notice from people or some reactions that tend to happen. Like there's the, I'm not going to talk to you at all because I don't even know how to approach you. Then there's the ask you a million questions about how you do things. And then there's also the, wow, you're so amazing. And have you experienced any of those, Ryan?
Absolutely. I have.
Yeah. We hear, as most of us will call it, inspiration porn all the time, right? The disability community, those who seem to be, dressing themselves are so inspirational and making it to work or even having a job. We get told that a lot. And again, Rob and I have spoken in numerous occasions about the need for education. And I actually said to Rob earlier today, I don't know how much more education needs to be done. Society just needs to wake up. These aren't new conversations, yet we're having the same conversations. So
which one do you, I guess, I don't know. I was going to say, which one do you like the least? But, well, I mean, like when people won't even talk to me, when my son started school, occasionally I would go to drop him off or pick him up. And often I would stand there and nobody would say anything to me. So I'm the only person standing there with a white cane. I don't know who's there. I don't really know people yet. Eventually I knew some moms from, our complex, and they would say hello to me, but it was so awkward. And I could hear other people chatting to each other. And I'm sure there were parents who weren't talking as well, like other parents who nobody talked to them either. But I always felt like, oh, it's because I'm blind and they're uncomfortable and they don't know how to talk to me. And that feels so rotten. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think more of my issue is walking into a room and talking to myself. There's nobody there, even though I swear I'm talking to somebody. I'm talking to a pole. People are afraid of people with disabilities and are maybe not afraid, but just uncertain on how to approach. Can they approach? And as you say all the time, Shawn, you feel like you are representing the whole blindness community when you're out and about professionally. People are seeing you, and that's going to reflect on the rest of us. And at some point, I feel the same way, though I'm not out there like you are. But at the same time, the other part of me is like, I don't give a damn anymore. I will be open, and I will approach people and talk to people. And I do care what people think. But at the same time, I'm blind. I'm not contagious.
Okay. So for the sighted people in the room here, like if you saw somebody who was blind at the school drop off, for example, how would you talk to them?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Is it you, Shawn? Are you there?
Let's say you don't know Shawn.
Does that matter?
I don't just randomly walk up to people I don't know, though, and just start talking. I don't know. That's a tough one.
If you see, a blind person standing at a bus stop.
If I saw a blind person just kind of standing there and it looked like maybe they didn't know where they were or whatever, I would probably just ask if they needed anything. But I don't just randomly walk up to people, like if I'm in a group, I don't just usually walk up to random people I don't know and start talking. So,
right.
I don't know, but that's just more of a social thing maybe.
Right.
Like but in what you were saying, like I've in the past had to divert people. Like Ryan and I will walk up to say a counter in a store or the passport office or something, and he's renewing his passport or he's wanting to ask a question. And I've had the people on the other side of the counter, they don't even look at him. They'll be like, can I help you? And I'm like, yeah, my husband wants this or whatever. Right. And then they're just talking to me. So what I do is I divert it. Like I don't even answer them. I just slowly turn my face towards Ryan and I just stare at Ryan and try to force the person to talk to him.
Yeah.
I don't care how uncomfortable you are. He's your customer or whatever. You're going to have the conversation with him because it's probably computer related and I'm not going to be able to answer any of those questions anyways, but that does happen. Yeah.
I think, it does have to do with social.
Yeah.
I think, okay, if I'm at parent drop off and there's one parent standing there, cane or no cane, I would talk to them to say, hey, which one's your kid? Or I don't know, I would say something like that just because that would be my personality to do that.
Yeah, I think see, I'm already having the mental argument in my head because I know that in my head I would be like, well, is this person going to be annoyed that I'm talking to them? Because they're just going to feel like, well, they're just talking to me because I'm blind and because they feel weird about not talking to me. So would they be talking to me if I wasn't blind? And so I don't want them to feel that way, but at the same time, I don't want them to feel like, say, you, Shawn, where you feel like people are just ignoring you.
If it was you, Shawn, and I knew your personality, I knew you were social and we get along, I would be like, oh, it would be that. But I think that's the uncomfortable bit is even if it's if there's a person sitting in front of me with a cane that I've never seen before and I don't recognize them, would I go up to them? I think it's just not knowing how they would respond. And everyone is so different. Like everyone would react so differently. So like what Rob was saying, that person, how would they feel? Would they be upset?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because in that school drop-off scenario, I would have been so appreciative if somebody talked to me. I definitely wouldn't have thought, oh, they're only talking to me because I'm blind. I would have thought, this is so cool. They're not freaked out by the fact that I'm blind. They're just connecting with me as another mom. So that would be my reaction. One time I was at the SkyTrain station, and in transit, I am often bothered by people who want to help me, who think I don't, who think I need the help when I don't need the help usually. And I'm so like braced for that this woman actually just wanted to strike up a conversation. And I was like super defensive. So in that situation, she's like, so how's your day going? And I'm just like, what's next? No, I don't need help, right?
They grab your arm and haul you across the street.
Yes, right? Exactly. But she actually didn't do any of that. She didn't offer any help. She just wanted to have a conversation with me and got on the train and chatted with me a little bit and introduced herself. It was so weird because that doesn't usually happen. So yeah, I guess there is also that experience of like, why are you talking to me? You're a stranger.
Yeah. Society, all of us need to be a little bit more open and have the ability to approach people, not be consumed within, with our own battles, our own struggles. Just walk up to somebody, strike up a conversation, be open. If they don't want to talk to you, I'm sure they'll tell you or they'll walk away. But at least you made the effort.
Yeah, I'm a little afraid of the rejection myself. That's I don't tend to put myself out there. I also don't know who I'm approaching. I mean, I guess sometimes if you hear people talking, well, I don't know.
It doesn't matter because you can't see them anyway, so you don't know who you're approaching.
I know. Are they male? Are they female? Are they 4? Are they 40? Like, I don't. Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
It kind of matters.
It does matter.
Yeah, kind of asking a fight.
But you can't see them, so you don't know. So you won't know until you approach them.
Maybe they're not even people. Maybe they're just a forest of trees. And I'm like, hey guys, how's it going?
Yeah, another pillar, Ryan.
That's right.
Yeah.
At least you made the effort.
Another pillar called John.
Okay, so what about the asking lots and lots of questions about how we do things? I have a funny story. So my husband, when we were dating, the first couple dates, I told him, you can ask me anything. He'd never met anybody who was blind before. We met online, so our worlds would never have really collided otherwise. And he had a billion questions. And after the second date, I was like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work. Like, he really just can't see past my blindness. That's all he's focused on. And so I kind of blew him off in an email. I don't think this is going to work out. I feel like you can't see past my blindness. And he was like, well, I think I can. You did tell me I could ask you anything. And, sort of threw it back at me. So I do tend to say that to people. You can ask me anything. And so they do. But it can take a while for someone to get through all their questions. Linda, did you have a lot of questions for Ryan?
I'm still asking them 20 years later. No, I don't know. Did I have a lot of questions?
It was probably just the regular day-to-day stuff, because when we met, we were living in different apartments. It wasn't just boom, Ryan, we moved in together. So, it was probably, how do you cook? How do you find the door in your apartment? How do you, all the how to use.
Yes.
How do you make coffee?
Yeah.
How do you pour coffee? I still can't stick a thumb into a cup. I won't do it. I have a fear of it.
My husband was asking,
it was more day to day
things like, oh, so you probably like listening to music because you're blind, or you probably would like to, go to a live show, or, he was trying to figure out what, but he was doing it in a very stereotypical way. Like,
right.
Well, you probably don't enjoy TV. I'm like, are you kidding? I love TV, but yeah, I prefer if it's described, but I do go to movies. I enjoy movies. And yes, I've even played video games, like I had to sort of shatter all of the stereotypes. And I was finding that was getting a bit much. Like, I mean, have you had the experience where somebody hasn't invited you to do something because they don't think you would enjoy it because you're blind, but they never actually asked you? Like that kind of, making assumptions.
From my recollections, anytime I've been invited somewhere and we go, I'm the result or the cause of my good or bad time. And so, if I decide to be interactive with whatever activity it is or whoever's in the room, I can make it a good night or I can make it a crappy night.
I remember one time, and this is kind of the opposite to what you were just asking, Shawn, is my dad and I had a tradition every Christmas we would go see the Nutcracker, and which of course is a ballet. And the first Christmas that Ryan was in my life, we brought him along to the Nutcracker. And it was about 10 minutes into the show. And of course, it's all music and then the ballet taking place. And Ryan turns to me and he said, "When's it going to start?" Thank goodness it was dark in the theater. I must have had the stupidest look on my face thinking, really? I just brought my blind boyfriend to ballet. And I said, It started 10 minutes ago. This is a ballet. I thought everybody knew the Nutcracker was a ballet. He thought it was more of like a play.
Oh, that's hilarious.
He was waiting for it to begin. Yeah.
Yes, I've never been to the ballet and I have no desire to do that.
Well, it's a great time, Shawn. It's a great time.
Did you have a good nap, Ryan?
No, I enjoyed the music.
The music was good. Of course, he loves his music. So
Right. Actually, my husband and I, we went to see Captain America. That was our first movie and it was not described. And I did fall asleep because it was like action packed. I couldn't follow it at all. He didn't really know how to describe to me. And so there are definitely things we might not enjoy as much, but but when you guys were dating, Linda, did you think about that? Like making suggestions of things you could do together? Were you concerned about, will he enjoy it? Well, obviously not, I guess, if you took him to a ballet.
Well, I didn't even think of it. I mean, most things we would have done would have been, like family things, outings, beaches, go away to Whistler for the weekend kind of thing. So, those were things that we would just sort of make sure when we were in sort of the moment of the things that it was stuff that he was going to get something out of as well. I don't really remember anything at the Nutcracker. I'll never forget that. maybe that was, like I said, it was our first Christmas together. So maybe that's why it's never happened since, because it was just one of those moments that was one of those enlightening moments, I guess we'll say.
I think too that, Linda and I are coming up on our 20th anniversary. 20 years ago, we didn't have what we have now, like touch tours. Mm-hmm. We didn't have audio descriptive museum exhibits. Mm-hmm. We didn't have audio description in the theaters like we do now. A lot has changed. And so I think what we did back then was, go for the walks, go down to Stanley Park, like Linda said, go up to Whistler, just do outdoorsy type stuff. We've been to casinos and it's just like jingle, 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 jingle. It doesn't do a lot for me.
Until he starts winning, then it does do a lot for him.
That's right. Yeah.
And he learns the difference in the sounds.
Yes. Right, I love the casino, actually. I can't go there very often. It's not good.
That's right. Yeah. So I think, coming back to that, I think society now has a lot more going for them than we did.
Emily and Rob, did you guys feel like you asked a lot of questions in the beginning, or did you feel comfortable, or did you want to ask questions? How was the questioning for you?
I mean, I remember like wanting to ask questions, but I still, for a long time, I was just chicken to ask questions. And so I would just learn through just conversations. Like you guys are talking about movies earlier, and I remember specifically the first movie conversation that I had with Ryan, and like thinking to myself, like, holy crap, like he watches movies and TV. Like, wow. And that was really that was a revelation to me. And so, we would talk about movies, quite a lot at work. No, we were working really hard, and we occasionally. Does
Steve listen to this podcast?
No. Steve doesn't listen to our podcast. I do remember like being curious about a lot of things, and just never really feeling like I should ask.
That's interesting, because I feel like that would impact what you felt you could talk to Ryan about, right? So like movies are off the table until you learn, oh, he watches movies. we can talk. So like that creates this social kind of isolation thing, right? Like, I don't really know what I can talk to you about. The things that I would talk to other people about might be offensive or might not be relevant. So therefore I'll just stay quiet.
Well,
Yeah.
I think like Rob was saying, if we're in our workplace, he could pick up on conversations I might be having with the other workers in the office, right? And so he would learn that maybe, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Sorry, Shawn, Star Wars rocks.
I'm learning to adapt.
But that type of stuff, right? He would pick up on the conversations that we're having.
Well, and even capabilities. Like I remember the first time, something went wrong with Ryan's computer at work. I remember being really amazed because he would just tip the tower over on its side. He'd find like the screws with his fingers. He'd unscrew it. He'd crack the case open. He'd be like, "Yeah, I think it's the RAM is kind of," and he'd just stick his hand in there and he's messing around with the computer and tips it over. Like he was doing things with computers that like I couldn't do. Or, and the same thing with certainly with JAWS and a screen reader, he was able to do things so fast. And holy crap, like the speed that he can listen to JAWS is just amazing. He can fly through a web page and absorb it like 10 times as fast as I can read it. Like, so there was all these things that I would just watch him do that really sort of answered a lot of those internal questions. And eventually you don't worry about them anymore because they're not really relevant. And in fact, like honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm too comfortable with it because sometimes you forget. Like perfect example, when I'm waving to Shawn as she walks into the conference room.
I killed myself laughing on today's Limitless show.
Yeah, I know. And some, and certainly like when I would do things like sighted guide Ryan over to Subway or whatever, and literally just forget that he's like on my elbow, and I don't know how many doorways I'd walk him into, or curbs that I'd like walk him off of. Like that was the one thing to me, like they'll always be ingrained in me. He ingrained in me two things. He's like, look, if there's a curb, you need to tell me there's a curb, that I'm stepping off a curb. And if it's an escalator, for God's sake, please tell me what direction the escalator's going in.
Yeah. The escalator's a big one with Ryan.
Yes.
I think he was killed on an escalator in a previous life or something. That's always been.
I think I did ask a lot of questions, and I think I still ask a lot of questions. I think also, unlike Rob's experience or Linda's, Shawn, you and I came onto Blind Beginnings peak of COVID. Our interactions for the first 6 months, basically, of me working here, maybe less than that, but was virtual. So like, I didn't like talk about forgetting about being blind. I'm blind. I never heard JAWS. I never saw your cane. I never interacted with you in person. So I got so comfortable with you over Zoom, and it got to the point where I remember at one point saying to Shawn, like, I need to physically be around you more so that I can be more comfortable with seeing, like, understanding how you move and operate in the world, because our relationship is 100% virtual. So we need to see each other so I know more about blindness.
That's really interesting. So when we did start to come into the office a little bit, was it like, did you feel like you were having to get comfortable all over again?
I think there was things I didn't expect. I remember the first time I came into the office, you texted me directions, and I remember thinking, oh, Shawn's giving me directions. Like, she's telling me what bus to take from where. I'm like, how does she know all the bus routes in Vancouver without, checking Google Maps or something? Like, but I think I was so comfortable to ask questions because we had already established a very comfortable zone before.
I wonder if that's just like sort of like one of the best ways to really become comfortable with it, is to just immerse yourself in it rather than just like ask a million questions. It's really just, watching and being with that person and learning over time, sort of organically.
Yeah. And I would say as well, like, my third interaction with the third person that was blind, I felt like I was starting all over again. And the process was like restarting. It's like, okay, I'm really comfortable with Shawn and I understand everything about the way Shawn operates, but then I meet someone new and they're completely different and they like to be guided differently, or they have different cues that I need to respond to, or, just everyone is so different. And it feels like I was learning all over again for each person that I've met.
Okay, Ryan. So let's talk about what we do to make people more comfortable. Like, I know I make stupid blind jokes with people when I first meet them. I feel like if I laugh at it, they'll realize they can laugh at it, and it seems to help. Do you do that?
I think I do to a certain extent, but I think of myself as quite an introvert, very closed until I feel comfortable, I guess, and then I open up. Yeah, like you, I will make light of certain, blindisms.
Because Ryan is very introverted. So he wouldn't normally come out and, do a blind joke or something like that unless he felt comfortable. Sometimes I'll mention something to him, like what I said before about the kids. And, he just opened right up with them. He has made a few kind of blind jokes when we've been in a group of people, and somebody will ask him something or whatever. But yeah, he is pretty introverted. So usually somebody else starts the conversation and then Ryan will get into it. He has to feel a connection to people, I think, in order to be able to really get into a conversation with them or feel comfortable.
I think that's where, you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone, step out of yourself, and take the initiative to involve yourself, to be that outspoken person. If there's others in the room and you're standing there, say something, hey, what's going on in here? Just you have to be willing to make the effort, because obviously not everybody's going to. They're not going to acknowledge that you're there. Some people might, of course, but at the same time, I think you make your experience.
It's interesting because I would say the majority of my life, I was trying to look sighted, trying to, never would ask for help, didn't want to burden people, didn't want to ask for anything, pretty much until I became a parent, I think. And then it was like, okay, this is actually me, my stubbornness and independence to a fault is going to possibly mean my child misses out on experiences. So I have to let this go. And one of the things that I think has made people more comfortable around me is that I am more comfortable being out about my blindness. It's not like I was hiding it, but walking into a room and saying, is there an empty seat somewhere? Whereas I would have just died and wanted to fall under the floor before I would say something like that in 10 years ago. So I think that also makes people more comfortable when you're just open about what you need. Like, oh, are there snacks on the table? What's there? Right. Just because then it kind of gives people permission to help you, and they know what sort of help. Well, I'm assuming they know what sort of help you need.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I think both of those are excellent, because I think that humor really does disarm a situation, and it really does sort of bring that back down to earth, and you're relating with somebody immediately. And the same thing, because I think that for somebody who's able-bodied, I think that that's one of the big fears, is that I don't know when to offer help, or when it's appropriate, or when it's not, or what's needed. And so I think that addressing those two things right off the bat, I think that is, it's a really good strategy.
Yeah, I had reached out to one of my longtime closest friends when I was thinking about this podcast, and I was like, I want to talk to people about the process of becoming comfortable, but I don't remember you ever being uncomfortable. Were you? And she's like, not really. But she said, I always wondered about things like, we're out in a restaurant and somebody puts my plate down in front of me. Should I give you the clock directions of what's on your plate, or just let you figure that out? Or if we're walking down the sidewalk and we're approaching a pole and your cane's going to hit it, do I say something, or do I just let? So yeah, that was kind of a good good for me to hear, like, okay, these are the things you think about, because I had no idea that she worried about that stuff.
I think also just keeping that line open. I think, Shawn, you do a really good job, and that makes me at least feel comfortable. It's kind of assuring that that line is always open to ask, like, oh, do you want to know? Do you not want to know? And then you just move on. You give me an answer, we move on. So that helps.
I feel like this has been amazing. I feel like this is my favorite episode, just so you know.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
It's for Shawn and Ryan. I'm stealing it from your list, actually, Shawn, but we haven't touched it, and it's something I want to know. How can you tell when people are comfortable with you?
Oh, like, good one.
What's that feeling?
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of when they just, for me at least, it's when they don't have to ask anymore. They don't really have to check in. They kind of just know what I need, when I need it. You know, there's no like, do you want an arm? I just take their arm. There's no, you know, when they hand me a drink, they're kind of like, they know how to do that. So it doesn't feel awkward. They're not like stumbling over the words that they use. It's just, and sometimes they forget that I'm blind, which I do see that as a compliment. I do feel like it depends when you're forgetting, like don't forget when I'm about to walk off a cliff or something. But if we're just sitting around chatting, it's not relevant, right? Yeah. Like it's not really relevant. And so there are some people who constantly make reference to my blindness in a social situation. And that's annoying. That's like, you don't need to do that. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but It's just kind of a feeling I get. Like, you know, if you're still checking in with me about things, then I feel like you're not 100% comfortable yet. You're still sort of navigating this. Although I still like, there's like it's like a hierarchy or something, right? Like there's like the hierarchy of comfort. And I feel like once people get to that place of being comfortable to ask and check in, that's awesome. It's just if they can get even past that, that's really the cream of the crop. That's like, okay, you just see me as Shawn and I just happen to be blind.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's the same. I think the other side of that coin, though, is that you're not coming across, or we aren't coming across as needy. I need this, I need that, I need you to do it this way, I need you to do it that way. You know, you for the most part, you kind of go with the flow. You know, if they approach you, start up that conversation, ask that question, you go from there. But I think the way we react to that makes all the difference.
Yeah, I'm thinking like my favorite people to hang around with, sighted people to hang around with tend to be vision professionals, like teachers of the visually impaired or mobility instructors, because they have studied this. They've been around so many people who are blind, and, you know, you go out for dinner and they just start reading you the menu and they kind of know how to do that. And they're going to the washroom and they say, do you need to go? And like just these casual things that just feel really natural, that make a huge difference, right? Yeah. Versus the person who doesn't offer and they just go to the bathroom and then you're like, oh crap, I had to go, but I didn't really have a chance to ask or whatever. So they just kind of anticipate what you're going to need, but not in a way that makes you feel needy. I think it's tough. I do feel bad for the sighted folks that are trying to get to that place, because it's tricky.
Yeah. And again, I think, you know, we mentioned earlier the whole education. You know, how many times, Shawn, have you gone to an airport and been offered a wheelchair, right, to take you to your gate? Yeah. Like I walked in here. Why do you think I need a wheelchair now? Yeah. You know, it's,
or that you can't do the stairs or the escalator and that you need the elevator. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, I'll take it. Most of the time I'll take it.
The wheelchair?
Absolutely.
I'll never take the wheelchair.
Oh, it gets me through the gates faster. It gets me past the lines quicker. Absolutely.
I'll take the golf cart thing. That's fine.
Hey, I'm blind. I have some benefits. I'm going to use them.
Thank you so much, you guys. I think this will help a lot of people, and I hope that it will. I hope that there are people who are sighted who are listening who have learned something and will maybe feel more comfortable to approach somebody who's blind in the future, and maybe help some people who are blind to kind of some tips on how to make people feel more comfortable. But thank you so much for sharing and being with us today.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thanks for having us.
You've been listening to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. If you have a question, a comment, a future topic request, please send us an email to limitless@blindbeginnings.ca. And if you haven't purchased your tickets for our virtual screening of Through My Eyes, we are offering a screening on Thursday, October 14th at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And tickets are $10. You can purchase them through our website, blindbeginnings.ca. So don't miss out. It's a really awesome documentary about me and sort of why I started Blind Beginnings. Please share our podcast with a friend, especially during Blindness Awareness Month, and join us next time.
This podcast has been brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Music for this podcast is composed by Shawn Bishop and Clement Chow. Production and audio editing by Rob Minot. For more information about Blind Beginnings and the work it does to support children and youth who are blind and partially sighted, along with their families, visit us on the web at www.blindbeginnings.ca, and also remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.